Well, I'm John Helm. This is Mike Hogentogler. And we're going to talk today about multifamily technology and how you can use it to drive improvements in operations. Is that fair, Mike?
Sounds like a plan.
Okay. So Mike and I agreed on a few questions here, and we'll try and leave some time at the end so you all can ask some questions if you have them. But I thought we'd get started by just talking about, Mike, how you've gotten involved in rent tech, and maybe a little background on how you got into multifamily too, because it's such a funny little asset class that no one really knows outside of our sector. It's a huge sector, but no one really knows it that well.
Yeah, interestingly enough, back in 2008, I worked for a large REIT out of Philadelphia that was primarily a lending REIT. 2008 happens, and a lot of those loans at 80% loan to value went to 120% loan to value. So we went from a lending REIT to a hybrid REIT, and then we bought a multifamily property management company. And he said, "Hey, you're going to move to Chicago, and you're going to run the management company." And I said, "Well, I don't know how to do that." He said, "Well, you're going to figure it out." I said, "Okay." So that was my kind of start into the multifamily space. And for the last 7 years, I've been with LCOR. We're a primarily East Coast, Boston down to Miami developer of multifamily apartment buildings, and developer and an operator. For us, when it kind of came to tech within the last 7 years, I think the model has really kind of shifted a little bit. It used to be myself and our head of tech trying to vet all these companies and all these solutions, and you're spending so much time getting 800 emails from all these different people with a different type of product, so much time on demos, and then trying to really gain insight into like who's going to get scale, who's going to get viable. And I think for us, the way we operated really flipped on its head when we first met RET Ventures, and it sort of became more of a network of owner-operators who could try to evaluate a lot of this tech together. So it's kind of flipped that dynamic a little bit on its head.
Yeah, and I guess I'm so used to, at these events, the moderator introducing us, but I guess I'm the moderator. So a little background on RET Ventures, for those of you who don't know. We're a industry-focused venture capital fund. I think what makes us unique is all of our limited partners or investors in our fund are large owner-operator developers of multifamily. We have roughly 50 LPs, of which Mike Hogentogler is one of them with LCOR. And our LPs own, operate, manage, and develop about 2.5 million units. So a decent sized footprint of the industry is in our fund. And you can think of all the obvious advantages that gives us in both assessing deals and then making investments. So a little background on us. And while we're at it, I guess, LCOR, for those of you who don't know, Mid-Atlantic developer primarily.
Yep.
And what do you have, about 12,000?
Yeah, about 12,000 units owned and operated.
Yeah. That you've almost developed all of them, right?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah, which is unique, I think. Okay, well, let's move on. Let's talk a little about, I guess it's now been 2 years since COVID officially ended. So we're in the post-COVID phase. I guess I can't ask the what changed about your business with COVID question, but what do you think's changed in the last 2 years? It seems like the pace of technology adoption sped up.
It did, and I think there's a lot of I think COVID was a nice kick in the pants that we collectively as an industry needed, right? I think generally real estate has been the same model since before I was born, and people have been really slow to adopt tech. I think COVID really kind of shifted the paradigm where when you look at your residents and you look at your renter preferences, we needed to accelerate the ease with which we made their lives and how they interact with both us as a team and with our buildings. So I think the real kind of jumping off point for us was, okay, now that if you don't have people that are in the office every day, how are you going to operate? And that transformed from, let's make sure we look at online payments, to how do we tour differently, to how do we interact differently. And then so much money came in through investment and brought way more opportunities, right? It used to be, you would look at a single stack solution all of the time, and now you've got companies that come out that are solely focused on, I'm gonna do one thing really, really well, and I'm gonna devote all my resources to that, and I'm gonna be the absolute best version of this type of software. So then the challenge to us became, okay, well, if you're gonna be outside of that stack and you're gonna be one of those types of solutions, then how do we integrate you within our business? How do we make you part of our flow? How do we deploy it kind of across the board? So I think some of those COVID initial things just accelerated growth that really needed to come to the industry anyway.
Yeah, I think that's a great lead into talking about just how you actually implement these technologies. So two-part question. A lot of your peers in our fund tell me they can't implement more than maybe 2 technologies a year that touch the field, given the operational complexity of running a large kind of distributed asset base. What's your philosophy on deploying tech? And then tell us, in the last 3 to 5 years, how many technologies have you actually implemented?
Sure. So I think we're, again, a little bit more background on LCOR. We're primarily high class A, transit-oriented company. And our philosophy internally is that we're going to live at the intersection of premium hospitality and premium technology. So we really have been pushing the forefront of technology early. While I understand some of the hesitation to go, 1 or 2 deals a year, we've implemented about 12 over the last 4 years. So we've been fairly aggressive with it. I think to kind of tackle both those questions separately, I think the paradigm has shifted with what we look for in tech. It goes beyond just, is this a solution that could potentially work? The first thing I look at is who's the CEO of the company that we're going to work with? Right? Because I want to understand their mind for innovation, their ability to drive a company forward, and their ability to pivot and change. Because the one thing that we know with tech is that it's not staying the same, it's always changing. So do you have somebody that's leading an organization that can pivot as demand or renter preferences shift? The second we look at is what's their financial viability. When I'm building a new building, I've got to think about tech that's going in, that my building's not going to deliver for 3 more years, and then it takes me a year to lease it up. So I need a company that's going to be financially viable and be here, right? It can't be something that's fly by night, it's the greatest thing, and then it gets gobbled up and then it's gone, and now I've got to replace it. I think then when you look at the types of tech that we've done, our focus has really been on the renter experience and how to make every stage of their life easier, as well as easier for our teams. Now, I'm talking more from the perspective of having 12,000 units. I'm not the size of some of these larger REITs, right? I don't have that luxury of opening up my own call center and opening up a massive data warehouse or opening up a massive shared services center. So we had to kind of pivot with the way that we've used technology. So for us, it became about best-in-class point solutions through each step of the journey that all kind of integrated and worked together. So the first thing we really thought was, okay, let's look at our leasing process and how cumbersome is it, how easy is it? And one of the things that we saw with our site teams were we just had too much delays in how do you respond to emails, how do you respond to texts? So we went with a new CRM system that included an artificial intelligence leasing agent. And when you think about, leasing, 85% of the questions that someone's going to ask you, they're all fairly predictable, right? Do you have a 2-bed? Do you have a 1-bed? Is it available in June? How much? What's your pet policy? When we made that shift, we were stunned that our traffic year over year at the same properties went up 2.5x. And so that one simple implementation allowed our site teams now to focus on the actual human interaction. And then we thought, okay, well, let's look at some of the different models that people have out there. And while I appreciate the model that some groups are going towards where it's tech full buildings with no people, we really want to deliver that intersection of tech and hospitality. So for us, it was, let's give people options, right? I want them to be able to interact with us, whatever makes their life easier, not mine. So if they want to take a guided tour with one of our leasing agents, great. If they want to take a self-guided tour, we're going to roll that out. But we're not just going to do the simple. We're going to make a whole curated, museum-like experience where you come into our building. So we thought, okay, now we've got them, ability to tour. We've got the ability of our leasing agents to help our site teams. Now, how do they get into the building? So we focused a lot on smart access control. And for us, that all became part of the whole curb to kitchen experience. How do I get them in the front door, up the elevator, into their units, and controlling all their devices with one solution as opposed to multi-point solutions? And then we said, okay, well, before they move in, what do we have to make sure that we do? Well, we've got to make sure that they've got the ability to pay us. So we spent a lot of time focusing on ways to prevent fraud. We're on the East Coast. A lot of the East Coast states that you see, eviction timeline went from what was 60 to 90 days to 9 to 10 months. So when you think of the value prop of preventing bad debt from going bad, look at what your true cost of eviction is, right? I mean, take your average monthly rent, times it by 10, take what you have to pay your legal team, right? Then figure out that if they're not paying you rent, they're not paying parking, they're not paying utilities, they're not paying amenity fees. And all of a sudden, understanding your true cost of eviction is massive. So for us, we went with a two-pronged approach with tech, one on the ID verification front and the other on income verification. And so we use a system that ensures that your income is truly what your income is, right? And they're able to read the metadata behind it. And so we thought, okay, well, now we've got them in the building, and now we've got them, with great access control, and we know they're legit, and we know they have a job. So how do they interact with us? And I think one of the points in the first panel that was really smart was about eliminating that friction, right? Again, give them the ability to interact on a way that's easy for them, not what's easy for you. So that's why everybody comes with our own branded app for each of our buildings that's individual to the building. So they can put in work orders, they can pay online, they can chat with other groups. And so all of those kind of solutions for the resident are all built on our own Wi-Fi, Walk With You Wi-Fi network that we've put in all of our new buildings as they come out of the ground. So the Wi-Fi helps them kind of, move throughout the building on their own individual network. And it allows our point tech solutions to kind of interact with them. So when you take a step back and you look at the whole resident journey, the way we do things now is kind of completely different than the way we operated in 2017. And the type of building that we deliver now is completely different than the type of building that we delivered in 2017. So for us, we kind of went all in early and quick and have, really, really focused on that resident experience and making sure that our vendor partners have great leadership and are financially viable.
Yeah, so you have to play VC to a certain degree.
Correct.
When you're signing up with a new vendor. Yeah, that's one of the reasons our fund was formed, was to help the industry move the tech ecosystem forward and help communally vet these companies and make sure they're well capitalized so they could serve the industry. Okay, well let's move on. Just out of curiosity, so we can gauge our discussion, raise your hand if you're an operator, owner-operator. Okay, so mostly on. Raise your hand if you're a vendor selling into this industry. Wow, okay.
Good split.
So about 50-50. Okay, well, we'll answer accordingly. I think, both groups, I think, will be interested in the next question, which is, how do you determine whether if somebody shows up on your doorstep and they've got the latest, greatest new technology, how do you determine if it's going to fit in your tech stack and if you should buy that product?
Great question. I think for us, we've learned some lessons with some groups that we've partnered with that didn't work out. And I think the number one key for us is they have to be willing to play in the sandbox with a lot of the solutions that we use. And at the end of the day, real estate is transactional. And so if I can make the greatest building and have it run so efficiently, but at the end of the day, I'm not going to hold that building forever, right? It's going to trade. And so when it trades, I need to make sure that the systems that are in place can work with a different company. And I think that's where my mindset shifted from viewing a lot of these other companies as competitors to more just people trying to solve the same problem. It's just a difference of scale or magnitude. When you look at even the largest owner-operator or the largest operators, they own such a tiny slice of the pie, right? So it really is a fractionalized industry. So for us, it became more about how do they play well with others? How do they integrate with others? And then the second thing is we have just stopped ever doing, again, portfolio-wide deployments from day one. Because anybody can pick a solution and be like, hey, that's great, and they sign the contract. But for me, that's where the real journey begins. And so I want to understand, before I commit to that contract, I want to talk to the implementation team. I want to understand how long of the journey are they going to be with me? How receptive are they to feedback? And then what we try to do is set up a pilot scenario where we pick 1 or 2 or 3 properties or a small region where I know that I've got forward-thinking team on the ground that are going to give me real feedback. They're not just going to tell me that everything's wonderful. They're going to tell me the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so what we've seen was it really was a lesson in change management for us, where you went from having to try to push tech to your site teams and overcome that resistance, to when you roll something out and the site team likes it and you show that it makes their life easier, that dynamic shifted to now we've got people that are calling us saying, hey, I want to be next. Can I have it? Can I have it next? And so it really, to me, is about good implementation. And I think the vendor partners that we use, the longer that implementation person has stuck with us before they transition you over to their stabilized team or whatever they call it, the longer they have stuck with us, the more ingrained they have kind of become within our solution. So I would say really focus on implementation and then making sure that people play well in the sandbox with others.